And we time, is that time?
Yeah.
It is. Okay. Exactly.
Is there anybody online?
I see a JD, which I thought was Jim Bird.
Okay.
So we will see, and then let me get recording going on Teams.
And we have no gallery today.
What's that?
Nobody in the seats.
Yeah.
No controversy.
So is that JB, Jim Berg?
Yeah. I think so. That's what she said.
He said he wasn't going to make it tonight.
It could be a different JB.
What other JB is there?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, there's Josh.
Stevens is his last name.
Yeah, it'd be JS.
Oh, I thought Josh was going to.
Okay.
Well, we're going to find out, won't we?
Yeah, we will. Roll
Ready?
call will prove it all.
All right, we'll call to order the City of Coos Bay Planning Commission meeting for May 11th. We'll start with the adoption of minutes.
Could we do a call to order first?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Roll call?
Roll call?
That would be great.
Sorry.
Commissioner Marino,
Here.
Commissioner Berg, Commissioner Miller,
Here.
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Stevens, Chairman.
Here.
Chairman
Aguirre.
Gary, got
Here. All right. Did you guys go over the minutes? We just need a motion to approve. And they're from last month.
For April 13th,
Yep, last month's minutes.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes from April 13th of 2021.
Second.
Roll call for all in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I thought we were going to do a
call.
roll call for,
Yeah. Who did the second? I'm sorry.
Here.
Bill, thank you. Yes, we'll do a roll call.
okay.
Commissioner Marino,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner Davis,
Here. Aye.
Commissioner Stevens,
Aye.
Chairman Aguirre.
Aye. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the work session for the Front Street Blueprint. And I believe we'll have a presentation from the DEA, Jim Hankey.
Yeah. Can everybody hear me all right?
We can.
Yes.
Great. And can you see the Front Street Blueprint slide?
Yes, we can.
Great. I have my camera on. Should I turn that off or should I leave it on?
That's up to you, but either way's fine.
You're fine.
Okay, well, I'll leave it on for the moment. Thanks for coming together and spending time talking about the Front Street Blueprint project. My name's Jim Hankey. I'm with David Evans and Associates, and I'm the project manager for a multidisciplinary team. On the line with me today is Jessica Bull from JLA, and they do public engagement. So we're the representatives of the consultant team here with you today. What I'd like to do is run through the slides, and then we should have plenty of time for questions and answers afterward, and we can come back and review any slides you may want to take another look at. So let's see if I can advance the slides here. Is the agenda up now?
Yes.
Great. So I introduced myself And what we're going to run through is the project purpose, give you a little overview of the scope of work, the schedule, the study area, and then the consultant team recently put together 2 memorandums. One was focused on the related plans and policies, and the second memo covered kind of our baseline assumptions. And I'll walk you through that a little later. And then, like I said, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. There's a third memorandum that we're working on, and it's related to understanding more about the existing and future transportation conditions in the study area. The participants in this project are, of course, the city of Coos Bay, and Carolyn Johnson and I have been working together a lot, and Carolyn's on the line if you want to say hello or if you have questions for her. But this is also a partnership with the Oregon Department of Transportation, and we've been working with Virginia Elant as their project manager. There's an advisory committee that we had a meeting with recently, and I assume you'll recognize many of the names on the advisory committee, including the mayor and a variety of other folks. But I mentioned I'm Jim Henke with David Evans. My transportation lead is Cameron Greil, who grew up in Coos Bay, so some of you may know Cameron. And a certified planner, Gigi Cooper, is kind of my right-hand person helping me. I mentioned Jessica and JLA handling the public involvement. And we also have Eco Northwest looking at market real estate and implementation issues as part of the project. Emily Pica is with them, and she was involved previously in Coos Bay on the Front Street Action Plan, so she has a good understanding of the study area. So the project purpose and overview. This is really all about implementing your vision, and the most current policy is the 2017 Front Street Action Plan and the 2020 Transportation System Plan. So those plans covered a number of topics: access and intersection improvements, circulation and connectivity, bike and pedestrian factors, especially safety, public parking, wayfinding, and waterfront improvement. So those are kind of the focus of the work, and the action plan already lays out a pretty good vision, and we are, with the blueprint, the purpose is to advance the vision that you've already created and start to refine it and see if we can get some projects moving forward. So the study area, I assume you're all familiar with. It's right there on the water. It's bounded on the west by Highway 101, on the east by the Coos Bay itself, and on the north by Ivy, and the south by Market Avenue. And this is an area of primarily industrial and commercial uses, but there is a mix of use in the study area. This is a little hard to read, probably. It's just an overview of the schedule showing you where we are here in May, holding our Planning Commission meeting number 1. So those memos, we did prior to today, but looking ahead, we're going to be diving into alternative facility design. We're going to be conducting additional outreach. And we're going to dive in later in October into kind of trying to identify the preferred alternative and how to implement that, and again, conduct further outreach. But this will lead to the blueprint adoption heading into June of 2022. So, we're early in the process. There's a lot of time ahead and several rounds of engagement. This graphic's probably a little easier to absorb. Here we are in May holding Planning Commission meeting, but looking ahead, there's going to be another advisory committee meeting and additional Planning Commission and advisory committee meetings. The phases of work, inventory and analysis, is kind of what we're wrapping up, and we're transitioning into this alternative facility design with the months ahead diving into a preferred design and then documenting that in the blueprint itself, and then looking forward to adoption in about a year from now. There was some additional objectives in the action plan, and I just wanted to highlight those. Again, focused on access, safety, wayfinding, parking, engaging the community, and also respecting the character of the area, the historic and cultural resources, and thinking about how public art and streetscape improvements can be part of the work. So I mentioned memo number 1. This is, we reviewed all the relevant plans, policies, and codes, and I've underlined here the Front Street Action Plan, because that's really the primary document we're trying to move forward. So this work is all about refinement and implementing the good work you've already been conducting. Your comprehensive plan is clear about the industrial character of the area, and that also aligns well with the zoning, the entire study area being waterfront heritage zoning. I also wanted to point to the connection with the 2012 Waterfront Park Walkway Concept Plan, which led to the 2017 Front Street Action Plan. It identified a number of recreational factors, wildlife, water quality, habitat, public safety, maintenance, a whole variety of things that is very consistent with the action plan. So it's just kind of this history of the city's been working on this for a while, and we're getting to the point where some things are happening. So that Front Street Action Plan had 4 priority investment types: 1 around open space and pedestrian connectivity, 2 employment uses that require access to the waterfront for success, number 3 improvements to the transportation network, particularly multimodal safety, and then number 4 public transit. And then there was 3 key themes in the action plan. Number 1, pedestrian and bicycle access to the waterfront. Number 2, programming and amenities. Number 3, celebrating Front Street's heritage as a working waterfront. And then the action plan looked at what might happen in the near term and be catalytic, what kind of longer term might be development supportive, and then what's infrastructure related. So this is really the policy plan, project, partnership foundation that this blueprint effort is, as I mentioned, trying to move forward. So to simplify, pedestrian and bike connections, we're looking at opportunity sites. Railroad safety, of course, is a very important issue given that it runs right down the middle of the road. We want to pay attention to waterfront access. So this was the diagram that was included in the Front Street Action Plan, and it shows this north-south pedestrian connection is very important to try to enhance that and complete it. And then there was some areas where access to the water was identified, and we've been starting to hear much more about the east-west connection back to the rest of the community as well. So this is our starting point. And working with Carolyn, we pulled out of the Front Street Action Plan some specific projects that this effort will be focusing on. The near-term catalytic projects, I mentioned the waterfront access, so that's really important. Sounds like there's already some movement on the boat launch near the museum, and also thinking about how the walkway might be developed in that area. Development supportive projects, this B series, includes wayfinding and parking management in the study area. And then the C series is all about infrastructure and particularly connectivity. So that north-south pathway along the east side is what the action plan calls out. And then circulation and connectivity improvements throughout the study area. And if there's any specific intersection improvements, we'll be taking a look at that as well. So that plan was finished in 2017. Things have continued to happen in the study area. It hasn't been a static situation, and one of the things that the city has been looking at is circulation in the study area. So especially with the Coos Bay Village coming online. So a traffic consultant working with the city has kind of created this diagram of an idea about how there could be some one-way pieces of the street system and then what would be two-way. So that's a very important part of the blueprint work that we're going to analyze in more detail and see if this, kind of holds up to further analysis. But something else that's been going on is you've been looking at developing a public parking lot. And I mentioned the boat launch and the boardwalk at the Coos Bay Village. So those are things that we just wanted to highlight, that it's not exactly the same as it was in 2017. A few things have changed, and we're going to work that into our plan. So the second memo is just a review of the baseline conditions, because we want to make sure that we base our work on a good understanding of what's on the ground today. So we looked at the land uses, the street network, bike ped network, transit service, utilities, natural resources, and other factors. And I'll just run you through a few exhibits that show you what we've found. Beginning with land uses, there's some water-dependent businesses in the study area. There's a variety of industrial businesses and auto-related that aren't so water-dependent. There's a vacant property at the ironworks, and then there's a variety of service and retail businesses as well. So very important to understand who's in the area already and how their businesses function, and looking ahead, we want to make sure we account for their needs. So the roadway system is a variety of city-owned streets and ODOT, of course, being in control of Highway 101. Those streets in the study area have different classifications. And so we've created this exhibit showing what's an arterial, what's a collector, and what's a local street. There's the railroad, as I mentioned, and the variety of railroad crossings in the study area, as well as some culverts and other infrastructure. So we're making an accounting of that and trying to see what we can do to improve safety related to the railroad. And then here's the study intersections that we're going to take a look at and see if there's any issues related to how they're functioning and if they can be improved. So there's a number of those we're going to take a look at. I mentioned the importance of the pedestrian network. So photos certainly tell the story about what it's like to be a pedestrian along Front Street. And so you can see where there's some sidewalk and where there's some missing sidewalk. I'm sure you're very familiar with the character of that area. And then if you're a bicyclist, you know, it functions in a different way. And I thought this Sharrow painted between the tracks was kind of a fun image to put up on the screen. You got to watch out for those cracks that are created by the tracks if you're riding on a bike. They can really wreak havoc with a bicyclist. So there is transit in the area, and so we've created this exhibit to highlight the Timber Express and this service between Lakeside and Hauser, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and where the transit stops are located. And then the Coastal Express route is something else we're taking note of. The historic sites, there's a few of them in the study area: the Marshfield Sun Printing Plant, Coos Bay Iron Works, the Logger Supply Warehouse, and the W.G. Webster Brick Building. And then street lights, storm drains, main lines. We're trying to gather as much data as we can here in this early phase of the work, just so that as we start to look into developing and refining ideas, we just have really good understanding of what's on the ground today. The natural resources, Coos Bay, of course, is an estuarine and marine deep water resource, and there's some wetlands in the area, and it looks like ponds were part of the study area up in the north. So this was based on GIS data, and we're going to keep track of that. And then the entire study area, of course, is within a tsunami zone. So we're just, noting that as well. So that really is a summary of the two memos that we've put together. And like I mentioned, we can go back and look at any of these slides, but ideally we wanted to spend a good amount of tonight talking with you about your hopes and dreams for the area and get a better understanding of your vision for what those improvements could be to access or the waterfront, wayfinding and art, economic development. So we created this slide just as a cue for you to feed back to us what your thoughts and concerns and questions are. And I just want to check in with Carolyn Johnson and see if I missed anything, Carolyn, or if there was any additional comments you wanted to bring up.
No, I don't think so. I think you got it all. We're just looking forward to hearing from the commission and getting your thoughts. Thanks.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you for that presentation. Do you guys have some thoughts?
Well, yeah, I do. Rex Miller here. The ponds were created by that chip pile, by the failure for the chip pile, but they're no longer there. Anyway, it's just interesting that they showed up. I think my biggest concern, well, I have two concerns here. One is you've not addressed the area from the water, and I think that is critical in developing that Front Street area. That used to be our road long before the highway was ever here, before ODOT ever came into existence. That was the road. That was how we got to town. So I think one needs to look very hard at that, accessing these properties from the water. And then the other thing that has always bothered me is across the bay, it's port property, but across the bay there's some huge possibilities with the islands there. And I think that's something that should be explored. Maybe maybe not in this framework, but I honestly think that's what would make Coos Bay Front Street work. Any thoughts on that, Jim?
Thanks for that. Was it Rex?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, the access from the water. I think waterfronts are such dynamic, interesting places, and you're right, we didn't really highlight it yet, but I do believe it's inherent in the vision to make that connection. But I thank you for the comment, because I think we moving forward, we want to always highlight what is that relationship and where are the connections. So total agreement.
Well, if I could add just a little bit, that whole area from the North Bend Boardwalk, Mill Casino, Bay Village, Coos Bay Boardwalk, end up down to Fred Meyer's, that whole area could be connected by the water. And at one time it was. So anyway, I think that's worth pursuing. And the other thing is, just living here all my life, you really you really haven't experienced a big ship that's down there loading chips until you're under it with a duck boat looking up at it. And that is huge. Looking underneath the pilings and seeing what the Mill Casino sits on, that is huge. All these things that people drive by and see them from the street side are it's a totally different view when you see it from the water. And I think that would add right into this.
Agreed. Yeah, thanks for that. I think it's an important aspect to really highlight and pay attention to as we develop the plan.
Rex, this is Carolyn. I had a question. Can you share a little bit historically about the context of your comments relative to the boat launch idea that Jim mentioned?
Sure. I think the boat launch is a great idea. Of course, it's for non-engines. I mean, it's just for paddle boats or kayaks and that sort of thing. And that kind of makes sense, because that's the better part of the bay. As soon as you get down by where the Coast Guard sets, then the swells get pretty deep, or in the wind, and so that probably wouldn't be conducive to that. But I think a lot of people would use that. There's a lot of kayakers around. If you see all the kayaks on people's vehicles these days, and if they had a place to put in, they could paddle around. I think that would be a huge draw. I'm not exactly sure where you put it, because there's a lot of pilings there behind the museum. So I'm not sure where that goes, but you definitely need access to the water, and it would be used. I would, anybody who want to, I'd love to take them in a duck boat and show you my point of view. And I think you'd see it differently, or at least maybe see it from the water.
I had just one more question, Rex. You mentioned the islands. Can you talk just a little bit about what a person would find there? I'm not familiar with that, but clearly you are, and you've been out there. Can you talk about those islands a little bit, and what people would experience were they to be able to get to them?
Well, yes, there's a really good access point directly across from Bay Village. And if you go out in that big island, well, there's a freshwater pond, there's deer, there's all sorts of animals out there, but there's also a big, nice grassy area. And if you go out and stand in the middle of that grassy area, or at least it was the last time I was there, but if you stand in the middle of that, you have no idea that you are just a stone's throw away from the city. You can't hear it, you can't see it. It would be an absolute perfect place for a couple of yurts, where people could go out there and experience the outdoors, and yet you're 5 minutes from downtown. I mean, you could have a pizza delivered as far as that goes. It's just, I've always said that. I've used to duck hunt those islands. I've been on them since I was 12 years old, and they, that to me is something that has just never been developed or never been looked at. And I think it's just a huge possibility.
So,
Rex, is that part of the, under the city's jurisdiction, or is that like state lands property?
so those properties are zoned by the SBEMP, and they were
Oh, okay.
built up originally by the dredge spoils that were dredged out of the bays, and they built dikes around them and filled them up to their current level. And
Okay.
they stopped doing that, partly because I believe that the disposal offshore was cheaper than actually running vacuum pumps and moving it across the water onto those sites. So the SBEMP zoning is pretty much natural resource. So developing the islands is going to be extremely difficult. I credit the Indians at one point, the Coquille tribe, for actually considering a project offshore the Mill Casino at one point, and nothing's ever come of it. But they thought about running canoes back and forth to the islands and making a kind of a natural history exhibit out there, and that would be great if you could do something like that. But I don't think you could, based on current zoning, do anything with anything other than extremely low recreation type uses, picnic tables, and maybe
Maybe
covers.
a tent or a yurt or a teepee, and that's what it should be. It should be left natural, but
Yeah.
but you'd have to really go out and experience those to understand it.
Yep.
Well, this is very helpful, and I'll be pulling out our estuary plan and looking at that, and we'll be exploring that a little bit. We've had an opportunity to update a piece of that plan this last few years, and we're not finished yet. So this is a great conversation. Thank you very much.
Just a comment about the pedestrian pathways. It appears that you're using all public right-of-ways. Is that correct? The extension from Front Street towards the bays are all in public ownership out to the bay.
Well, part of it, well, it's kind of, let me see how I can frame this. When the Coos Bay Village property was developed, the city required a 14-foot access easement off the back side of that for a boardwalk. And there was also a similar requirement for the museum. If properties along Front Street would develop against the bay, that discussion would happen again. But for now, the extent of that area that we know we could have right on the water runs from Coos Bay Village down to the area where we would have a potential boat launch. So it's a start.
Just a comment. The museum obviously is a quasi-public type of development down there, and clearly pedestrian access to the water on something like that makes a lot of sense. You used the term required of the Coos Bay Village and the museum. I recall it in the Planning Commission meeting when we approved Coos Bay Village that we asked the developer at that point in time, if he was interested in providing an easement for the public to access the waterfront. So that doesn't sound like a requirement, number one, and that's important. Asking a developer on a big project like that for access for the public should be negotiated between whoever's doing the development, which obviously happened that night with Gray.
And it's in, Jeff, it's a beautiful walkway.
Yeah, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It makes a lot of sense for the developer in this particular case at Coos Bay Village, who would want as much public participation to move, and I would say pedestrian movement inside his project to improve the accessibility and just for all of the businesses in there. But the issue of actually demanding a public right-of-way across private property should be avoided at all costs. You've got plenty of right-of-ways here, you've got plenty of streets, but please steer clear of requiring any private business to provide immediate access. You can ask them, you should negotiate them with them. If the city, like in the case of Coos Bay Village, has provided $2 million worth of public infrastructure, and if somebody offered me $2 million worth of public infrastructure to assist my development, I certainly would be open to providing public access across my property to help facilitate that. But to require it through some planning process is just not okay. And I have some personal experience with this, if you can't tell.
I can tell.
Did you have anything? No. Well, I don't have any further question or comment.
It's the Front Street blueprint was, I went through it quickly today, and it's nicely laid out, and you've got a great plan. It should be, with the public input going forward, should be a great step forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're excited about working with you together on it.
Perfect. I don't think we have any further comment. So thank you so much for your presentation.
All right.
Thank
I'll
you,
just-
Jim.
Yeah, thank all of you. I'm really happy to be partnering together with you and looking forward to coming back again and sharing more about what we learn and put some ideas in front of you and get your feedback. So thanks so much. I really am looking forward to this.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time. Thank you.
All right. Have a great evening.
Thanks, you too.
Okay.
Was there
Bye-bye.
any staff comment that needed to be? Any administrative and future matters for discussion?
Not at this time. Thank you.
All right. Any commissioner comments? Meeting adjourned.
All right. Okay, very good.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
Yep. Good night.
Good night.
I know.